Something I've always been confused about is that General Patton, probably the most popular guy after World War II, screaming off the mountaintops, "Hey, like, why are we stopping at Germany? And let's go take out Stalin. Let's go take out Russia all we can. We're in a better position than they are." And nobody really listens to him. He dies under mysterious circumstances. He was potentially the front runner to be the president. Like, why weren't they like heeding that advice and like go like? Because if Russia was the biggest threat, the suspicious side of me wonders, like, oh, okay, since this beast of the military industrial complex was built up during World War II, like, did they let Russia consolidate and like regather their strength so that we could like justify spending on this Cold War for the next like couple decades, or like was it just a stupid decision?
Yeah, it's pretty complicated. I mean, imagine we'd been through. It was just a few years. Our involvement in World War II was only what 3 years,
Yeah.
less than 3 years. Even though it seems like a huge amount of time looking back on it in history. But we were attacked in December 41. We didn't really mobilize till late 42, and then so we're going 43, 44, and then the first half of 45.
Hmm.
So 2.5 years. But it was an effort by the whole country. But all of that carnage, all of that sacrifice, we've defeated Hitler and Stalin was our ally. And come on, you really, are you crazy? We're going to invade. Not even Napoleon could take Moscow. What are you talking about? So I can see that a lot of the public is saying enough. We don't want nothing to do with this. Truman, who had been vice president, he was never
Hmm.
clued in on any war plans. He didn't know about the atom bomb until after he became president. But well, a couple things. You had Franklin Roosevelt was kind of like Joe Biden toward the end of toward his fourth term.
Yeah, I'm
He
not a
was
big
not
fan.
coherent. He couldn't think for himself. He had people designing how the post-war world would look at Yalta when he went there with Stalin and Churchill. And who did he put in charge of that?
Oh.
Coordinating that whole strategy with the Soviets? He put a State Department policy planning guy named Alger Hiss. Alger
Mm.
Hiss was a Soviet agent. Alger Hiss was
Wow.
was shaping U.S. government strategy for the post-war period on Stalin's terms.
Unbelievable. How the hell that? I've always heard things about FDR being surrounded by socialists or by
Yeah.
being surrounded by Marxists or even him himself. Like, so what happened with that?
Well, if he was surrounded by socialists, like big deal. Okay,
Yeah.
they're not. Yeah, they're against property rights and but no, he was surrounded by controlled Soviet agents. So it's not just people who had a different idea. It's people who had a different loyalty to a different country. And he had around him Harry Dexter White. He had his best friend in the White House, Harry Hopkins was. There's a debate on whether or not he was a Soviet agent. He probably wasn't, but he certainly was. His inner circle were almost all Soviet agents, the most influential ones, and he was living in the White House, kind of like Valerie Jarrett was with Obama, and running policy. And wait, where were Valerie Jarrett's parents? What party did they belong to before they went to Iran?
What
They
was
belong to
which party?
the Communist Party USA. So this stuff has a heredity to it. It goes back and forth for generations. So back then, now during World War II, um, you had the OSS, which was our Office of Strategic Services. It was our foreign intelligence service. They did some awesome stuff against the Nazis.
Really? Didn't
But
they learn from the Nazis? Like, weren't they kind of modeled after the Nazis, the OSS?
no, they were modeled after the British Secret Service.
Okay.
The actually the Nazis took their system from the Soviets when they were at peace with the Soviets in the 30s. They sent Gruppenführer Mueller, who founded the Gestapo, went to Stalin to say, "Hey, how can we copy this?" And that's how it came
Hmm.
about. No, so our
Ah,
OSS was modeled by the British because we didn't have a foreign intelligence service, and the British, who were already in the war, said, "You guys need one. Can we help you set it up?" Or
so
not so much,
MI6
"Can
you're
we help
talking
you
about.
set it up?" "Let us help you set it up." So there was a fantastic British agent named William Stevenson. His code name was Intrepid, and
Mm.
he set it up, but he had his deputy at the British Embassy in Washington, his name was Dickie Ellis, help set up the OSS. But nobody knew at the time that Dickie Ellis was a double agent working for
Oh,
Stalin.
come on.
So the
Wow.
British intelligence officer who helped set up our wartime OSS was actually an agent for Stalin. And what did Donovan do? He was a smart guy, sharp guy, real patriot. hard charging guy, anti-communist also. He was, but he was so focused on fighting the Nazis that he wasn't looking at the bigger threat. Because by 43, it was clear that Hitler was going to fall.
Yeah.
He wasn't really looking at that. So his executive officer ended up being a Soviet agent. This was all revealed in intercepts that were declassified back in 1995. So there were people, there were known and unknown agents across the government giving advice on this. So to get back to your question, why didn't Patton succeed with this idea? Just most people weren't into it. And then a lot of people were saying, no, that's foolish. Let's just have stability. And some of them were well-minded, but a lot of them were working for Stalin.
That's unbelievable. Like, so you're talking about Wild Bill Donovan, the guy who like ran the OSS, and then so intelligence agency has somebody from the Soviet Union, then FDR has somebody from the Soviet Union around him. Did like, and so I'm assuming we didn't have anybody on their side, or like the British MI6 didn't have anybody on their side either. So were they superior to us in terms of like I guess they were superior to us because
Yeah,
we didn't really have them set up.
we didn't have an intelligence service at the time. We had Navy and Army intelligence, but no real like CIA version until
when did
after
theirs start?
Which
Like,
ones?
was this KGB you're talking that was infiltrating us?
Yeah, the KGB started in December 1917, and
Oh,
their whole,
wow.
but they had a mission because they began as an underground movement. The Bolsheviks did, so they knew how to operate clandestinely and how to do all the nasty, dirty tricks, and for a revolutionary purpose to take power. Then they applied that to expand their power to infiltrate not just Russian Tsarist society, because they infiltrated all the way up to the top in the Romanov royal family, or near the top. So, and then they had a Russian civil war after this, the anti-communist Russians against the Bolsheviks, but the anti-communists were all divided against themselves and they didn't have money. So how did the anti-communists get their money? The Bolsheviks gave them the money so that they could then identify all of the anti-communist leaders and people
Wow.
and they say, and then they were saying they were using the money. The Bolsheviks weren't, like, the anti-communists didn't know. They just knew that this really wealthy guy is giving us money. And so they started bringing people back from exile who would have been a big influence in against the Bolsheviks. They would have had a wonderful popular support. So they were lured back into Russia where they were all assassinated. It was a long multi-year operation that went on through the 1920s.
They were
So they,
clever, those Bolsheviks.
yeah, and devious. So they don't have the same moral mindset where, you're going too far on something. No, it's by any means necessary for them. So we're limited by laws and by Judeo-Christian values and by just the Enlightenment and these other values that did not limit the Bolsheviks or the Soviets or the Nazis or the jihadists.
If you enjoyed the short clip, click right here to watch the full episode, and remember to subscribe to the channel. God bless.